Hey guys, so this is going to be a quick camera test of the Oneplus One. We're using the 64GB Sandstone edition, and this is the back camera recording at full HD. Every clip that you see in this video has been recorded on the Oneplus One, and all the sound is coming direct from the Oneplus One as well, so you should be able to get a feel for how good the microphones are, but also how good the video quality is. This camera can also do 4K recording, but from personal experience, when you use 4K on a camera with such a small sensor like on a smartphone, it has to make the ISO higher, so the image actually looks less clear than it would be with full HD. So this is using full HD, which I think is probably the cleanest picture that you can get off of the Oneplus One. Interestingly enough, the front camera only does 720p, which is strange because it's a 5 megapixel front camera. But the front camera isn't really something that I'd use very often, and probably most of you don't use the front camera very often, so this is just going to be showing the back camera. We're not going to have any front camera in this video. So the first thing that we've got going on here is a bit of a depth of field test. So this is fairly close to this branch on the tree, and we're focused on the branch, and I'm now going to shift the focus over there onto the background, which at the moment is blurred. Now I'm going to shift it. So you can see it's not really smooth shifting, it's fairly jerky, but it does work very well, and you can get a nice blurred background if you focus on something fairly close up, because this is an f2.0 lens. This camera does also have an HDR video feature, so this is using HDR video. So after this I'm going to do a quick comparison to normal video to show you what the difference is like, but this is pointing up at a fairly bright sky, but I'm in quite a shadowed area at the moment because of all the trees around me. So we're now going to have a look at what it would look like with HDR turned off. So this is with HDR turned off, so you can probably see that it's a much darker image. You can see the sky fairly well because that's what I'm focused on, but all of the trees are very dark and you can't make out any fine details on the trees. We're now going to do a bit of a zoom video test. There are some cyclists over here. I'm going to zoom in now. This is all digital zoom. So this is zoomed in all the way. And you can see that it's still fairly clear, still fairly good quality, even though I'm zoomed in 4 times. And the reason for that is because this camera, as I said earlier, is capable of 4K video. But that also means that it's capable of doing full HD video at 4 times zoom. So this is zoomed in a very long way. Most smartphones would struggle with this. Most smartphones would get very pixelated and noisy. But you can see here that this is doing very good job of keeping lots of details. It struggles a little bit with light when you're zoomed in all the way, so you can see that it's struggling a little bit with the auto exposure, but it's doing definitely a better job than most smartphones would be able to do. So one thing I've found that this camera isn't very good at is focusing on small close-up things. You can see here there are some twigs floating from a tree, and I'm going to try and focus on those twigs. Normally this wouldn't work. So you can see if I tap on them, it gets them for a second, but they don't stay locked in. If it was a bigger object, like if I put my hand there, then it focuses on that completely fine. But as soon as you've got, so if you set it up like that, put a bigger object there, focus on it and lock the focus, that's the way to get this sort of thing in focus. But if I go off of it and then try and focus again, you can see that it just doesn't want to focus. I'm not sure why that is. If I zoom in, it might work. I haven't tried this before. No. So the camera doesn't seem to be able to focus on small objects. But like I say, just need to put your hand there, focus on it and move it out of the way, and then you've got whatever you want in focus. So we're now going to try a little bit of time-lapse video on this camera. It does have built-in time-lapse feature. You can set the interval to be anything between ½ a second and 10 minutes, I think. It's quite a long range. No one would really use that on a phone like this because the battery would just die. I'm going to set it to be a ½ a second interval between the pictures, and I'm just going to do a time-lapse of the clouds moving past up there. They're moving quite slowly because it's not that windy at the moment, but it'll just give you a feel for how good the full HD time-lapse looks on this camera. So you can probably see that this camera does do a pretty good job with time-lapse. It's full HD, looks crystal clear. Obviously it's not going to be as versatile as something like a GoPro for time-lapses, but it still works very well. And like what I've got here, I've got the camera mounted, I've got the phone mounted on a tripod. So you can still do, as long as you buy adapters, you can still do all the same sort of thing. Mount it on a tripod, mount it on one of those gorilla pods that lets you put it on branches and things like that. So you can still do everything you'd be able to do on a GoPro, just it's a lot easier on a GoPro because a GoPro is made for time lapses and video, whereas this is obviously a phone, but it does definitely do a very good job of time lapses. So there are some people that are even further away than the other ones were, and we're going to try zooming on them to try a really far zoom test now. So that's the furthest we can zoom, and we've got 4 times zoom. You can probably tell now that this is handheld. So I'm holding the phone rather than it being on a tripod, and this is where one of the main flaws of the camera starts to show. So most high-end smartphones like this one come with optical image stabilization, which allows the image to be extremely stable. This phone doesn't have that, which means that when you're zoomed in, if you're holding the phone rather than it being on a tripod, you do get quite shaky images, like you can see here. It's not a problem at all when the camera's still, but when it's moving, it's very shaky. It's not as noticeable when you're zoomed out, but zoomed in, that is quite a big problem with this phone. So we're now going to do a bit of a macro test and try and get as close as we can to this tree branch. So at the moment I'm about 1 metre away, and I'm going to move it to about 10 centimetres away. So that focus is completely fine. So you can see, you can get a lot of detail with this camera getting close to things. I'll try and get even closer. So that's extremely close now. And the thing is, because this is a 13 megapixel 4K camera, I can use digital zoom now and get even closer. So this is extremely close up on this tree branch, which is something that you can't do with most phone cameras. Most of them won't actually let you get this close. But the Oneplus One is definitely a good choice if you want to be able to do that. And you can see in the bottom right down there how much it will blur things if you get close. So if I move the camera around, you can see that's extremely blurred. Obviously you can focus on it, but that's one of the benefits of having an f2.0 lens, because of how much you can blur backgrounds when your subject's close up. So that brings us to the end of my Oneplus One video camera review. If you do have any questions about the phone or the camera or photography or videography in general, then just leave them in the comments and I'll try and answer all of them as quickly as I can. If you would like me to make any other videos about certain features of the Oneplus One, then also leave that in the comments. I have done a video of gaming and also vlogging on the Oneplus One, both of which turned out to be very, very good for a phone. But yeah, just leave comments down in the description, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one.